I've always had a love for cameras, photography, film and cinema. Ever since I got my first phone, the first thing I would do was open the camera app, see how high of a quality photo I could get and how many megapixels the camera had. I would then go on to take thousands of photos and videos until the phone was full of storage, and then try and delete some old ones and basically repeat the process. If that sounds like you, I recommend you stick around and I'll tell you how a real camera like this one can completely change your life. It's always amazed me how filmmakers were able to tell stories with a lens, keep you basically on the hook for 2 hours plus, and in the case of movies like Star Wars, completely immerse you in a different world and let your imagination run free. Similarly, with photos, photographers are able to tell you a story with each frame. There's like a feeling that comes behind each photo, and they're able to get that across in such an amazing way. So when I was doing research for this video, I wanted to dig a bit deeper and find out where my love for photography came from and why I've started to get into it. And I kind of came to the conclusion that it was because of my mother. So when she was obviously younger, probably 20 years ago, she bought this camera here. Now this is a Canon EOS 500N. Hopefully that focuses for you. But essentially this is an old film camera. So basically it takes 35mm film, you open the back, you put it in, you pull it across, you take a photo, up to like 30 photos I think it is, and then you send them off to get developed. This was long before the era of, you know, SD cards where you could simply pop open the back of the card or the camera, take out the SD card and put it in your laptop or your PC, whatever it may be, and transfer the files that easily. She used that camera to capture some crazy moments back in the day. I think it's really cool to go back and look at those photos and see moments that obviously I either wasn't born to see or was just too young to remember. Even on our trip to New York, here's some photos, I'll throw them up on screen now, that she took. I think they're fantastic, but it gives you a feeling like no other. And there has been a craze recently where people are actually going back in time to film cameras and they're reshooting on film. And the reason that is because with film, you have to be very particular what shots you go with. You have a limited number of shots. It's not like your digital camera where you can just, you know, take 1,000 photos one after another, get 10 wrong. You're limited to 30 or you're going to have to get a new roll of film. So you're really forced to think about composition. You're really forced to think about the scene you're capturing, and you're really forced to make those 30 shots worth it. Interestingly, if you follow Peter McKinnon, you'll know all about this craze, and I'll link a video up above, but basically he's going through the whole process from conception almost, where he's taking out the camera, going to a location, taking the photo, to when he goes to a lab and gets them developed. It's really fascinating. If you've never seen it before, I recommend you check that one out. Now, you don't need to have an old camera like that and need to shoot on film to kind of get into photography. Definitely not. I went with this Fujifilm XT-5, and I'd be a pretty noob photographer. Even now I'm still a complete noob. I'll throw up some photos as I'm talking here, but when I personally picked up this Fujifilm XT-5, I was no camera expert, and being honest, this is my first proper camera. Before that I was using my iPhone, and some of you more seasoned photographers might say that I jumped into the deep end, and yes, I would agree with you that, you know, I did jump into the deep end to an extent. The main reason I did that was because I wanted a challenge. I wanted to throw myself into the deep end and figure out how to swim. Personally, I hate starting off with something really basic to then sell it a month later because you've already gotten to that level and now you need to look for another camera or whatever it may be. I'd rather have something extremely intimidating and something so complex that I don't understand and learn my way up, if that makes sense. At least I can grow into this camera rather than having to sell it in 2 months because, you know, I've outgrown the camera. There's so much growth in this camera. You know, a lot of you Fuji guys will know what this camera is and how good it is, but to the more novice people watching, you have a ton of dials up here that you have no idea what to do. And you know, you're going to have to figure all this stuff out. That's kind of the beauty of it. I was looking at the Sony A7 platform. They have the A7S, the A7 Mark III, all this sort of stuff. I think the A7 Mark IV just came out. But what I found with Sony was it was kind of robotic. You know, it has a shutter speed of whatever. It can literally just blitz photos. And granted, this camera can too, but it probably can't keep up with the, you know, new, very latest Sonys potentially. But I didn't want that. Like, with the Sonys as well, you have to go back. There's a lot of post. You have to edit everything, put every photo into Lightroom and kind of edit it one by one. That didn't interest me. And with Fuji, I found that what I really was looking for was a camera that I could point and shoot, take the photos, and then basically export them straight to my phone to post them or get them printed or whatever it may be. That's what's interesting about Fuji. They have a load of built-in they call film simulations. So to give you an idea, one's called Classic Chrome. Basically, it puts like a certain filter almost. I don't want to say filter, but it's kind of like a filter on photos, and they just come out as like perfect JPEGs, and they give you that film feeling. And I'm not interested in kind of going in and editing every photo one by one. It just doesn't interest me. It puts me off photography. Just know there are options out there like this for people who don't want to be editing every photo. Granted, you can shoot raw on this. You can go and edit every photo if you want to kind of bring the best out. But that's just not what I like to do with my photos. Maybe, when I get more advanced or whatever, that's something I may want to explore. Now, those of you who are filming with kind of Fuji cameras and stuff like that will have heard of the X100V. Massive hypes around this camera. It's basically a pick up, point and run, kind of gun and run, or run and gun, run and gun type of camera, where you literally just point and shoot. It is built-in ND filters. It has basically everything in a tiny little compact package. It's perfect for like tourism, city breaks. You see all these guys going around doing, street photography, all this sort of stuff. A lot of them use an X100V. It's just like the perfect tiny camera. Now, I was going to go for that before I chose the XT-5. A few reasons I didn't was because there's too much hype to the point where you're on a waiting list trying to get one. The beauty about the XT-5 and basically every other Fuji camera is you can walk into a shop tomorrow and buy one. I'm not interested in waiting however long it may be to spend 1,500 quid on a camera that I want. Like, that just doesn't interest me. Now, this one was more expensive by a good bit, but I think it's worth it. Again, something to grow into. The X100V was limiting when you start doing a bit of research. The lens is not detachable. It's very limiting. Like, you couldn't take that for a professional work, I don't think. With this, you could. It's also a great hybrid camera. Video, it does like 6K downsampled. It's a fantastic camera. But yeah, that was a big thing. I wanted to get up and running as fast as I could, and I wasn't bothered kind of waiting on a camera that, it's already like 3 or 4 years old, the X100V. So yeah, I didn't want to go for that. So how has this camera changed my life, you may be wondering? I'll break it down fairly quickly. It's completely changed my perspective and kind of how I gather and frame photos and what I see. I've always been good at composition in my head. I can always see, just naturally nearly, I can see what will look good on a photo. So with a real camera like this, it forces you to take it to the next level. It forces you to think of new angles, learn the ins and outs of the camera, what settings are best for this environment, and so on and so forth. You also learn a lot about what a lens is, which kind of lens should you be using in which scenario, and what the 18 to 55 means on this kit lens that I have attached to it right now. Is this a zoom lens? Is this a prime lens? What kit lens should I buy? All these considerations that you have when you're first buying the camera become learnings, because you go down a rabbit hole. You watch best lenses for city breaks, best lenses for nature, best lenses for landscape photography, and it just takes you down this rabbit hole of like camera videos, and it's fantastic. But it's all a massive learning curve. Now, one negative that kind of stands out from this camera, and it's nothing to do with the camera itself, it simply has ruined my previous experience of like an iPhone camera. This might sound ridiculous to some of you who are already photographers, but when I bought the iPhone, which is recording me right now, iPhone 14 Pro Max, I thought this was the bee's knees. I thought the camera quality was fantastic. The detail on the raw images is fantastic. Now, it is, don't get me wrong, it is. But when you have a camera, either crop lens or full frame, it will completely change you. Like, I'm pulling up photos on my laptop, I'm pulling up photos on my PC, my Mac Mini here, and I'm zooming in and seeing the fine details of the sheep I just took a photo of on the mountain. So it's something you can't really do with an iPhone. Now, there's levels, obviously when you're paying basically double the price of an iPhone for a camera, and the lenses can sometimes be even more than the camera itself, that's to be expected. But I'd just be ready for that. Like, a lot of people, and myself included, when I was buying a camera, I was thinking like, how good could it really be, But yeah, it really is good. And even the lower end cameras are fantastic. Even if you were to spend 500 quid or whatever it may be, they will give you like a level above what your phone can already do. So keep that in mind. It will ruin your phone. And like, when I'm going to events or when I'm going somewhere nice, I'm always taking this with me now, and it's just a habit. I look like a bit of an idiot walking around with a camera all the time, everywhere. But yeah, no, I enjoy it. I really love it. Now, As well as having to learn all about lenses, you'll also have to learn about ISO, aperture, what a viewfinder is, and you'll have to start learning programs like Lightroom, Photoshop to get the most out of your photos. Now, as I said earlier, I don't use them too much because I like the raw output of my camera, but it will force you to learn those programs. I know for a while I was putting off Photoshop and stuff like that, but once you actually get into it, it's really enjoyable. And you see the original photo and you're like, how did I take this to the next level? It just becomes something completely different with editing. And that can be really inspiring. Sometimes you'll see creators, North Borders is a fantastic one that I follow, doing great work with cameras, and it just inspires you to take what angles they're using maybe into your own photography. I've certainly done that. He's big into cars, for example. I'll then take that into maybe an angle where I'm shooting a car, or where I'm shooting certain things in certain cities and stuff like that. This video isn't a review of the camera. However, if you're currently on the fence about taking the leap and buying a camera, I recommend you go for it, because after all, if it's not for you, number one, you've tried it, which is another thing tried, which is fantastic. Second of all, you can always sell and recoup most, if not part of your money, depending on the brand and the camera. So give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? You find a new passion, you make a new career, you become the next Peter McKinnon on YouTube. The possibilities are endless, so please go for it.